Hello, my name is Farida Badamosi, and I am a programmer for the Athena Film Festival. And welcome. I am a Black American woman with brown skin, locks. I've got gold earrings. I'm wearing a green sweater top with a gold image of a house. And then in my background, I have a beige and black with colorful Post-its. And I just want to say thank you so much for joining us here. On behalf of Barnard College and Women in Hollywood, it is my honor to welcome you to the 11th annual Athena Film Festival. This festival is dedicated to celebrating the stories of bold, courageous women leaders and the filmmakers who bring these stories to life. Thank you again for joining us. This year's festival would not be possible without the support of our dedicated sponsors. Please join me in thanking Athena's founding sponsor, the Artemis Rising Foundation and its CEO and founder, Regina K. Scully, whose visionary leadership makes our work possible. A special thank you as well to our premier level sponsor, the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, which shares our commitment to showcasing stories of women in science. To all of our sponsors, whose names you will see before each film and event, thank you for your commitment to challenging our culture to be more inclusive and inspiring audiences in the process. This year, we wanted to create something new and exciting to bring to our audience. So we came up with these fantastic 8 different program areas that we believe react and respond to our current moment. This program area is discovery. In this program area, we invite you to fall in love with new voices. It has been a difficult year for filmmakers with theater closures and production halts. But as you've seen here, emerging filmmakers are resilient and the future of the industry is bright. I'm so excited to present this panel, bringing in new voices in a post-pandemic film industry. We think it very much fits into the Discovery program area. And I'm very pleased to welcome Amanda, who will be moderating this conversation and will introduce our panelists.
Thank you so much, Farida. Hello, my name is Amanda Salazar. My pronouns are she and her. I'm a Mexican-American woman with light brown hair. I'm in a bright red shirt with a black undershirt. And you can see probably some iPhone earbuds in my ears. I have behind me, there is a window over one of my shoulders. I also have a plant behind me, and the walls behind me are all a wooden frame. I am the head of programming and acquisition at a company called Argo. We are a new shorts distributor. I'm also the theatrical booker at the Northwest Film Forum and co-director at Camera Obscura. So a programmer through and through, so to speak, and very excited to actually be hosting these very creative and talented filmmakers, artists, kind of like, I don't know, I'm just very excited to talk to you both, but we are going to jump in with our descriptions first. So Maria DeCotis, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Yes. Hi, my name is Maria DeCotis. I have pale skin and brown curly hair. I'm wearing a light green sweater with lace trim, and I'm in front of white walls and the white doors of my closet. And I have a bulletin board with lots of colorful pictures and note cards on it behind me. And I am a comedian and a filmmaker, writer, director, actor.
Wonderful. Very happy to have you today. And next, Naz Ryaki, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Naz Ryaki. I'm an Iranian writer and director. I have brown skin and curly hair that's up in a bun with bangs. I'm wearing red lipstick and a kind of a seafoam colored top. Behind me, there is a Persian hanging rug that depicts a scene from a hunt, which is ironic for a vegetarian. And also there's a photo from the Black Trans Lives rally and demonstration in 2020 in Brooklyn that was captured by the artist Richie Shazam. And as I said, I'm a writer and filmmaker. I live and work in Brooklyn, New York. Thank you for having me.
Like I said, thank you both for joining me today in this conversation. I'm really looking forward to actually talking about really, I think, your creative process during the pandemic, to be honest. I think as Farida gave in her introduction, you know, part of this panel is about like bringing in new voices, but not only, you're not necessarily new, but kind of, I feel like being able to be creative during this time is really inspiring. So I would encourage us all to, you know, have this conversation between the three of us, not just me asking direct questions to both of you, but of course, I'm going to start with some questions. So In thinking about this, I wanted to start broad first, and then we can get into, the individual work that you've both been doing and are doing. So first, I'm curious about trusting your instincts as a creative. Like, what kind of draws you to it? How do you let it guide you, so to speak, especially during a time when there felt like it didn't feel like a time to kind of thrive creatively, and yet you both did. Could you perhaps expand on that? Maybe Naz first.
Sure. So I think as an artist, I'm always questioning myself and my ideas, and that process helps refine what I'm going to do and create, and it's a necessary part of it. So what I've realized about my instincts in creating work is that the right thing not only appears, but also sticks around. And so I can force myself to create something. I can come up with a great idea for a piece to write or a film to make, and I can love the characters, and I can live with the characters in my head and have conversations with them and have them have conversations with each other, which is often how it works. And I really want to do something with them, but there's often an element, there's something that isn't revealing itself to me. And that sometimes means that I have to move on to the next thing. And giving myself permission to move on. I started as a writer. I have a BA in journalism and an MFA in creative writing. And I think as a young writer, I thought that everything I wrote was precious, even if it wasn't great, there was value in it. And I think being able to let go of things has been a really important part of the things that I do end up creating, if that kind of answers your question.
It does. And I apologize again for it. We just start so broadly when we're just getting, warmed up and knowing each other, but because I just want to maybe pick up on that fact when you said, or the point when you made kind of letting things go. Did you kind of learn that recently, or is this again a part of your process and you've just kind of honed that a little bit?
I think that was a part of that was specifically a part of my writing process, which has helped my filmmaking process because I'm a fairly new filmmaker. It took a really long time for me to learn that. And I think it took me becoming more and more confident and a better writer for me to be able to let go of the things that just weren't working and not to think, oh, I need to save this because one day I might come back to these 3 sentences, and to not try to force something that really wasn't going to happen. So it actually took a really, really long time. As a young writer in my 20s and early 30s, I was very precious about everything I wrote. And now I don't hold them that close to me.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. That did answer my question. And Maria, what about for you? When I kind of ask something that broadly about your instincts and them guiding you, would you be able to tell us about your process?
Yeah. I definitely identify with being able to let things go and, not just holding on to everything. I think that's a really important part of being an artist. A big thing for me with comedy and stand-up, I always say that stand-up saved my life because it was this thing that I could go to, work towards myself, and I had to work on my own voice and my own beliefs and what I want other people to believe and the perspective that I want to give out to the world. And just by examining those things in myself and bringing them out and not being that precious, I learned a lot, and I was able to make lots of meaningful connections with people in the audience. And a big part of working on things during the pandemic was also about, following that intuition of taking care of myself too. I was having a really hard time. I was really depressed. I didn't have a lot of energy. I didn't want to make things. But when I would make things, it made me feel better. It made me feel good. It made me feel like I was doing something. And then in turn, that made other people feel better. And, they would say, thank you for making me laugh. And that felt good too. So in taking care of myself, I was able to take care of other people. And I think that's a big thing. I always talk about how just coming from a comedy background that you should make yourself laugh. And that it's not always about what you think people are going to think is funny or what you think the audience wants. I mean, it's always good to have your audience in mind, but I think first and foremost, you should make yourself laugh or make yourself, learn something new about yourself and bring that out to whoever you're making art for.
Yeah, that's Really important, I think, really for all, right? At the end of the day, you want to be able to sit back and enjoy the work that you've created as well. I would very much agree with that. So for perhaps for our audiences that might not necessarily know, I know I jumped in about instincts, but perhaps they don't know what you have been up to during since the shelter in place starting last March. I was wondering if you could each kind of describe what you've been creating, perhaps in your own words, and then I can maybe fill in as to some things that I was particularly taken by. Maria, if you wouldn't mind starting with yourself, what you've been up to in the last couple of months.
Yeah, well, starting from the beginning of the pandemic, I started making more comedy videos online because there weren't very many opportunities to perform live because that kind of all got shut down. And adapting stand-up to be on a Zoom call was kind of weird to me, and I didn't really like it. So I started making comedy videos, and one of the main things that I started to do was make these parody videos of Governor Cuomo, and they got really popular. And I think it was, it was just something fun and healing to do. And also I was learning about what was happening in the pandemic from the briefings. So I was kind of watching them anyway, and then just like creating something out of this thing that I was watching every day that was giving me inspiration and information. And yeah, trying to move forward with the tools that I had that were that I had control over in that moment, rather than trying to force my way to try to do stand up somewhere else, or in a different, in like a digital format that felt weird.
Mm-hmm. And I'll just add for our listeners or viewers that are, tuning in. I mean, these videos you have mentioned have been seen by millions of people. So when you add all of this, which is remarkable. And like I said, there's much more than you do than just outside of this. So, but I appreciate you kind of giving kind of the context to what you've been kind of up to creatively at this time, which, by the way, there is a catharsis that's definitely felt when watching you kind of take on politicians with your own voice. So nicely done. And Naz, for you, if you wouldn't mind talking about what you have been, what you've been doing during shelter in place.
Sure. So for me, I have always wanted to be a filmmaker, but for some reason, it felt like an impossible goal. And it's strange for me to say that because I'm usually the kind of person who goes after the things that I want. But I really do think this is an example of needing, to see yourself in those positions. And I'm an immigrant. I'm Iranian. I'm 40 now, and as a young person going to school, there were no examples of Iranian women in the States who were filmmakers, and I really thought that industry was reserved for a certain type of person, namely white men. And of course, now as an adult and as a cinephile, I know that there are and have been incredible women filmmakers, but certainly we know that the representation is still not there. And so I pursued writing, thinking that was the thing that I would be able to do, and all the while thinking about all of these films that I wanted to make and how I wanted to do it and what I wanted, the stories I wanted to tell, and and learning from all of these incredible filmmakers. And so, and my work has been in advertising and marketing. And so when the pandemic hit, I lost all of my clients, and I panicked for a moment, and then I made the conscious decision to not panic and to use this as an opportunity to change my life. So in April, I decided that I was going to make a short film. And by the end of May, we were shooting it. And New York was still in its sort of shelter and coming out of shelter in place at that time, and the stores were still closed. And the film, I'm sure we'll talk about it, is it's a narrative short film, but it stars a real life bookseller, and it's about a bookseller who is also going through this experience in New York and the isolation of the pandemic. And so I thought, what do I have to lose? I'm just going to do it. I made the film. We shot over 2 days with just me and a DP on set, and I put it out, and the reaction to it was really incredible. I thought maybe 200 people would see it at most. And I think between IGTV and Vimeo, it has over 70,000 views at this point. It went on to win a Vimeo staff pick and then a Vimeo Best of the Year award. And within a 3-month span from the end of May, I made that film, and then I also made a second film. I decided that it would be a trilogy called Andros in the City. The first is Sincerely Eric. The second is Andros in the City, which is a loose continuation of the first film. So that's what I've done. And there is a part of me that feels like I've been so productive. I've made 2 films in a very short time span with very little money. And then there's also the part of me that still judges myself. I think, God, I've had a year. There's so much more I could have done. There's so much more I should have done.
That's so interesting that you even want to bring that up, because I know I experienced that too, as someone who has like different creative outlets, or just like that ingrained productivity that is put on us is really difficult. I feel like when you're also trying to have a creative outlet, which sometimes requires boredom. It requires like unproductivity to actually be inspired in a lot of ways. It's interesting that you would say that upon reflection, I think both of you have been incredibly productive, and in fact made some really actually cathartic work, to be honest, between the two of you, right? And so, I mean, Naz, the film that you mentioned, Sincerely Eric, for those of you that haven't seen it, I definitely recommend going to Vimeo to watch it. It's so of its time. Like, it really is, to your point of view. And I love hearing that you wanted to be a filmmaker and then you did it. But could you kind of talk us through, like, this is your first short film that you did, and it's like made about the pandemic. It of course transcends that. I think a lot of it deals with human connection, and it deals with just wanting to be, I mean, for me, it really spoke to wanting to be around people personally at this time. And so I was just curious if you could kind of bring us back to, deciding you wanted to make a film, and then kind of where the story came from, what you were reacting to, kind of the whole project. I would love to get some more information on, if you wouldn't mind sharing.
Yeah, of course. So the film, I once I decided to make a short film, I knew that I had very limited resources. And so I wrote a script. In part, I knew I wanted it to be about this time and about New York. And part of me really wanted to make sure that I wasn't sort of perpetuating the stereotypes of what was happening in New York. I didn't want to have boarded up stores, for example, in the film. And I didn't want to have just vacant streets, because that wasn't an accurate portrayal of what was happening. So that was a part of the process. The other part of the creative process really came from a lot of conversations I was having with Eric Derone, who stars in the film and plays a character named Eric that is partially based on him. He and I were both single at the time. I still am. And we were really, we would have these long discussions talking about our isolation. And I don't know, it feels like 1,000 years has passed and also no time at all. But in that moment, between the end of March to sort of the end of May, before everybody started coming out of their house and hanging out in the parks, it felt very lonely to be living alone in New York City. And, I was thinking a lot about my friends who had partners or who had kids, or even my mom, who was living with my brother and his family, and feeling not envious, but sort of like wishing that I also had that. So I really wanted to tell that story. And then the other part of it was working with the limited resources I had. Eric has a beautiful bookstore called Left Bank Books in the West Village. And in ordinary circumstances, the store would have been open and I wouldn't have been able to shoot there. I would have had to pay, and I didn't have a budget for that. My friend Uli, her husband, is a director and editor. And I asked him on a whim if he would shoot this film for me. And he had a camera and he said, sure, why not? The stakes were so low at that moment. I always knew I wanted to make something great, but I had no expectation of what I could make because I'd never done it before. And also having a crew that small, just me and Alec and Eric, and then the star Eric on set, made it easier for me to experiment, because I wasn't standing in a room full of people who had done this a million times, who knew what they were doing, and being worried about, doing things wrong or letting them down or coming off as ignorant about the process.
Well, and going back to your moment, just so you're aware, the loneliness factor, I'll just chime in. Like, I was ready to get a cat, and I'm not really a cat person. I was also alone at that time on the West Coast. So, I think that's what really resonates, especially for me. And I think anyone that watches that movie, that wherever you're at relationship wise or whatever that is that you're looking for, to me, it really struck me how we meet people and how that was completely, taken away. We're all wearing masks now. People don't make eye contact with each other. Just saying hello to people felt dangerous at that time because we didn't have a lot of information. So it's in some ways I think you really succeeded, I would say, at making a film that's very much of its time, but about a deeper, need for human connection.
And to your point, at that point, when the people who were living alone were and not dating, were not touching anyone, and so that was the other really big thing for me. And
right.
And on the first day, we also have a scene with my friend Monica is in it, and she was there, and we did the scene, and then she stayed for the rest of the day as we shot the rest of it, and we took a group photo together. And at the last moment, when we set up the camera, she reached around and hugged me, and we were all kind of shocked that had happened,
Right. Shocked, and then also probably exactly. How do I react to this? But I love it. I need it. We all need to be hugged at this time. Yes, that's, yeah. I will say that's very powerful, right? It's like exactly what you're saying. You've really captured that in the film. Maybe jumping to you, Maria. I'll try to make this segue as smooth as possible, but I do want to talk about specifically your Cuomo kind of parody, so that, the sketches that you've been doing. And I'm really curious to you. I really appreciate you saying that you wanted to do work, the place where you were at mentally, and kind of the work that drove you to kind of get out of yourself or move forward in some way, really strikes me. And yet I'm really would love to hear your thoughts around kind of being the receiver, like being someone that is, beholden to basically Cuomo's briefs, and then going, okay, this is what I get to work with. Like you're almost kind of given the material and what kind of comes with that. I'd love to hear about the process, and especially if you could kind of bring us back to the first one that you did, the first sketch on him.
Yeah. Yeah, he definitely was just like my comedy writer, I guess. I think there's also something about people love seeing women dress up as men and put men's words in our mouths because it just looks so ridiculous to see a woman act like that, because she would never get away with the same things a man would, in the things that he would say and the tangents that he would go on and the stories about his family. I just don't see a woman getting away with all that. But yeah, I definitely, I wanted to stay informed on what was happening in New York first and foremost. So I was watching the briefings. But also something about him was very familiar to me because I have a lot of Italian men in my family. And so I know how they are. And so just like that's the sentiment, the attitude, the accent, the way he gestured and moved his body was just all very familiar to me, and it felt like something I could really latch on to and do truthfully. And so when he first went on that long story took up like half his briefing about his daughter's boyfriend and the spaghetti dinner, right. I just thought it was hilarious, and I just was like, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen, and is anyone gonna are the reporters seeing this? Are the journalists seeing this right now? And I just wanted to do something with it. And like you said, it was very cathartic for me to work on these things and to try to move forward and move through what was happening in the world and what was happening in my personal life. And there were some times when I would be, and I was quarantined in a very small room. It was like 60 something square feet. It was very small. I had no closet. Everything was just sort of packed in there. And I just spent so much time in that room trying to find new corners to shoot something in. And And it was fun. It became like a game. It became a thing for me to get up and do in the morning, and a reason to get up and a reason to make work. And yeah, there were some times, when I would be in the middle of filming something and I would be exhausted, and I'd be like, oh, I don't want to keep going. I can't do this. I just want to like stop and cry. And then I would, encourage myself gently, like, get through this next take, just like try this take. And if you get it right, then you can take a little rest and just sit down and like breathe for a minute and then just keep going. And because it's just good for you to keep going even when you don't want to. And it really did help me get through just how scary that time was, that scary and lonely time, like we were talking about.
Yeah, it really was, thinking back to that. And then it's kind of, I don't know, maybe your feelings about this of, I don't know if you actually go back and watch your work from that time. Maybe that's something I'll ask that question first. Do you go back and watch those briefings ever or even your own parodies of them?
I haven't gone back and really watched his briefings. I mean, I'm honestly so sick of watching myself and hearing his voice. It's just like, I've heard it so much, the syncing the audio and the editing. And it just, I've watched it so much already that once I'm done with something, I'm like, okay, I never have to look at it again.
Right. I was going to say, my question was more out of curiosity, right? Almost like about that process and how you're processing it. And the reason perhaps I brought that up is so me watching it currently. And again, thinking back, especially to that time, like both of you were saying, it was so, just even thinking back to it, it actually causes my body to like seize up a little bit. It's very, it was a very traumatic time for us, and what we knew and what we didn't know. And then what we were fed, the information was from politicians, or our governors, our president at the time. And it was, who do you believe, who do you not? And Maria, like this, watching that just provided this level of, not necessarily, like, it just allowed you to kind of somehow like feel joy, and not in the way that you're like, this is a joyful time, but like to feel some kind of moment of laughter, or just like kind of pointing out the humor in this, which was not the situation, but more of how it was being delivered. I think your video on what you know and don't know, or who, and I'm apologies for butchering the know and what you don't know and who he knows. But for anyone that's watching, I also recommend watching that one. It so perfectly captures just that entire ramble in such a beautiful, concise way, which I think comedy, that's what you're incredible at what you do. So they're able to make us like laugh at these, the strange happenings in the world. So even thinking your comment about the confines of your space makes me think a question for both of you, which is about the literal restrictions that you had, and kind of, from being very small crews, Naz, and what, in this story that you wrote, from the confines of your apartment, like what surprised you actually that you learned from being so restricted during this time? Naz, would you like to start?
That's such a thoughtful question. I don't know if I have a thoughtful answer for it. I think there were a lot of things that surprised me. The fact that I did it surprised me, that I was able to create these two films,
Amazing.
I think that was
incredible.
But also to your point, I'll say also incredible. We're here at a film festival that celebrates female filmmakers. Like you talked about it earlier, about just like the general, normally how the lack of funds, support that women get in the industry, that is already challenging in itself. But and then there's even more restrictions placed on you creating during COVID. So sorry to take that tangent, but it is really remarkable that both of you, again, were so creative during this time. But sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, thank you. I agree. It's totally surprising. I think I think the other thing that surprised me is on the technical side, that I could make two, aesthetically, if I know Maria hasn't seen the films, but Amanda, you have, they're very lo-fi, and that was a decision that I made. Certainly right now, the technology is there for me to have been able to make them look incredibly sleek. But I admire a lot of my favorite films were made by women in the 70s and early 80s. And I love, that's why I chose the square frame for the film. That's why the color of the film isn't, both films are colored, but they do have that lo-fi aesthetic. That's why the sound isn't refined. Those were all creative decisions that I made. And what also surprised me was that I was able to make two films literally with just me and a DP. And then the other night I was watching, actually yesterday, I was watching Barbara Loden's Wanda. I don't know if you've seen that film. It's one of my favorite films.
So great. Yeah.
I'm writing an essay comparing Wanda to Nomadland and about the parallels between the two.
Wow.
I think they're very similar. And Wanda was made with a crew of 4. It was Barbara, her camera person, her cameraman, her cinematographer, and a sound person. That was it. Whole feature film. Yeah. And because she couldn't get funding for anything else, even though she was married to Elia Kazan. Yeah.
And even if we might say, going on this tangent, is that, I think it profoundly gets to also like loneliness and female like how women are misunderstood and just so more like the emotional kind of like her emotional bandwidth in that film is so remarkable. I'm obviously a very big fan of it. So again, I love how we're making plugs for many different things to watch during this conversation. I think I hope that you post it somewhere that actually all of us can read it, or wherever you're going to publish it. Please let us know.
Well, I just pitched it to Criterion Channel's current.
Great.
So we'll see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really wonderful. Yeah, Maria, for you, you maybe mentioned it a little, about the literal physicality of being restricted, and I'm curious what perhaps surprised you with that.
Yeah, definitely. I was surprised at what I could accomplish just literally by myself. I was just like a one-woman production company, and yeah, I think that something that was really inspiring to me was when I started stand-up. It's writing, it's performing, it's acting, it's all one thing, and you're doing it all yourself, and you have to devote a lot of time to wearing different hats and creating this show for people. And I knew that I could edit videos, and I didn't know a lot, but I just Googled and learned more. And the more I learned, then the more characters I could play, and I could duplicate myself. And, and there's so much that's possible that for one person to do. And I think, and I think it's really inspiring and powerful to see women pull together any resources that they have and just do with what they have. They can really do amazing things. And I was surprised at how much I could accomplish. I kind of liked challenging myself to go further or learn something new in Premiere Pro, or learn something new in what other character can I add to this, or how can I go further? And it was fun to do.
Yeah. And I'm thinking now about kind of how we watch now, like especially now, and thinking about both, the mediums in which your films were, or films and also sketches. But Maria, I would like to also note, like, you do have a film coming out that you're, and I believe it's March 5th is your release date for your short film you directed, but you made that before COVID, but you are having a film release online.
Yes.
And by the way, the title of that film, if you wouldn't mind saying.
The title is L'Incidente Intimo. And that is the title.
And so the reason I bring that up, and Naz, with your work and also with the trilogy, maybe the third film getting made soon as well, is your thoughts around, distribution. Like, because I'll say this as someone who programs a lot of places and talks to a lot of filmmakers who constantly get asked about, where my film ends up, or connecting with audiences, and audience is a very broad term. Like, who are those people that are actually watching it? But your work, both of your work, has been seen by many people and has really connected with people. And so I guess to me, I'm just curious about your thoughts on digital distribution, your thoughts. Like, I know you maybe perhaps didn't have an option to do anything else with this, but I'm the reason I'm kind of prompting this, this part of the conversation is, again, we're here on this panel for a film festival, and I'm hoping that filmmakers are watching this and that they can really take this drive that you both expressed and see like this creative need to create, to make things, but then also this fear about kind of the distribution front. And so if there's anything that perhaps you learned that you also maybe would care to share, or just perhaps your thoughts again on trying to connect with audiences at this time.
I have so much, I love film festivals, and it's my dream to be a part of so many film festivals. And I have so much respect for the work of programmers who have to view thousands of films and make really difficult decisions. But I will say this, that the film festival circuit feels very much like an institution to me. And as a woman of color and as an immigrant, I'm someone who has routinely been rejected by gatekeepers, no matter what I've done. And when I decided to release Sincerely Eric, there were there were multiple reasons why I didn't go down the festival circuit. One is that I felt like it was a timely film that people needed to see, and I didn't want to wait a year and have it go through all the rejections I knew I was going to get in order to release it. The second part was I had no faith that the gatekeepers were going to actually accept me. And that is not paranoia. It's literally years of experience of being a very good creative writer. And my writing is on my website, and still being rejected left and right, being questioned, having to prove myself more than other people from the time I was really a child up until now. And then the other part of it, I think for me, is that, festivals have a lot of restrictions in terms of where your film has been shown, for good reason, because festivals also need to support themselves and want to have a draw for the audience. But short films aren't features. They don't make money for the most part. I mean, indie features barely make money, but short films, I don't know any short film that has made a lot of money. And so to me, having to hold it back and submit all of these festival fees, which interestingly enough, for Sincerely Eric, I actually, out of curiosity, I released it. And then I also applied to all the festivals that would accept it, having been released online. And it has been shown at festivals where someone knew someone and said, hey, you should watch this film, to the programmer. And then the programmer reached out to me and has gotten rejected from every other festival I've sent it to, even though it went on to win a Vimeo award and got written up in the New York Times and Fast Company and all of these things. So I kind of proved myself. And when you have such little money to begin with and you're self-funding something, to pay all of those fees for a short film with all the restrictions also placed on it just seems kind of like an antiquated system that I understand worked at a time when digital wasn't a thing, but it feels very gatekeepery to me still. So I'm actually curious what you think as a programmer, because I also do value the experience of a festival and the work that programmers and curators do. So I don't want it to come off as offensive by any means.
Oh, no, you're not. I mean, you have to understand, I've been programming for a long time. And to me, it's not, what I do doesn't exist without your work. Right. So I'm not like, so we have to, and I think actually right now in COVID, I would be one to say that festivals really need to rethink about that process, whether or not, and the festivals I have worked at, I would say that like your film is watched and it's not about who you know. And it really is, there is integrity there that's kept. And I also know festivals that's not at, unfortunately. That's just, again, I think the nature of just kind of the circuit in general, when you have thousands of film festivals around. But that burden often falls to the filmmaker about knowing exactly, which festivals I should, apply to and where I should go. Feels like I can go down many different roads with this, but to me, it's, aligning or participating in a festival that does hold the filmmaker in high regard, because we don't have a festival without you. Like it doesn't, the event does not exist without your creative work. And so I've, always tried to, and I've continued in my own festival, the festival that I do actually isn't, we don't do submissions for one of the events that it's a pop-up cinema. And so to your point, because you're absolutely right, a lot of filmmakers have this experience. And what I would say though, there's also thousands of films made every year. And so and maybe that is what you said, very eloquently, kind of the systems in place, like aren't necessary. Like you can understand that the numbers that say only 50 or 75 or however many short films are played and hundreds to thousands are submitted. And you're like, that's just a competition I don't necessarily need to be involved in. Right. And yet we're kind of consistently being told that that's the path to move forward. And a part of this question was around, working outside of that system, and you guys both succeeding in that way. You were able to find these audiences that people talk about. I think films also too are evergreen. Like I hope that Sincerely Eric keeps coming back and programmed years down the line, as for again the themes I had mentioned before. So there are great programmers that I know and great festivals that they program the good work and are doing the hard work. And to your point, it's there's a lot of, I would say restrictions in place in terms of the locale and their community. Like festivals, besides being pulled into the filmmakers, are also there to service their like literally city or town or where they operate out of. So it's a really interesting time for festivals too at this moment, as we're trying to find that connectivity that we can offer one another. But clearly I see I tangent a lot, but the point is that you did not offend me with that statement. I think it's something that programmers should also be confronted with at all time. We should be responsive to your feelings towards that system that clearly has not worked for you, and how we can be better. Right? We need to be better.
I would say also that as a filmmaker, you asked what advice, Maria, and I can't wait to hear Maria's, because you've obviously had such huge success, but no one is going to advocate for you the way that you're going to advocate for yourself. And I think that artists are often very shy about that. And they feel like if their work is good, it's just magically going to like take off. And that I guess happens for some people, but I think the magic part of it is very rare. I think it's okay to ask people to watch your film.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say the first one too, like there's a reason our email addresses are places, like reach out, like there are humans behind that. Although sometimes it doesn't feel like there really are, people watching your movies on the other side of that. So that segues really nicely to you, Maria, and like perhaps advice that you might have in terms of getting work out or connecting with audiences at this time that you could offer perhaps any filmmaker or creative that's watching this right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the internet can be a really just great equalizer, and that you can put out whatever you want and literally anyone could possibly see it. Like the president of the United States could see it maybe, because everyone's on there. And in a time, like Naz was saying, like before the internet was possible and reachable to everyone, and we had all of these tools at our disposal, there was this kind of industry that was very closed, and that still exists, that closed industry with the gatekeepers. And I've experienced a lot of rejection too. But the most powerful thing that I could do for myself was to just really focus on what I have control over. And what I have control over is this platform online. And what can I do with that to really show people what I can do and what I want them to know about the world and what I want them to pay attention to. And I think that's really, really important as a creative in any field, is an online presence like that, because it's like no one can take that away from you, and it's yours, and no one can say, no, you cannot. I mean, there is still censorship on some platforms, but, it's, because I made the film that's coming out, I made a few years ago before COVID. And that was my first film that I ever made, that I ever directed and wrote. And I did like an Indiegogo. I used a lot of my own savings just from like waitressing, and I saved a lot of money, and I spent a lot of money on it. And I did I submitted to a lot of festivals. I got rejected from a lot of festivals. I was feeling really down about it, but I still believe that it's a beautiful film, and I really want people to see it. And I'm actually really glad that I'm able to put it out at a time like this, where people have started to pay attention to my other work. And so it can be seen, so it can just be seen, in general, but like also it'll be another aspect of my work that people haven't seen before. And that wouldn't have been possible. I don't think I would be anywhere near where I am in this industry if it weren't for the internet. Like if I were just auditioning or sending scripts, or there's just no way. There's no possible way. Every little step further that I've gotten in my career is only possible because of the internet.
Speaking of like the internet broadly, I feel like, is there perhaps like some advice? I feel like I have these anecdotal stories of also like how terrible the internet is, and not even like anecdotal. I think we've all experienced that. Yes. And I'm curious, like for you as a creative, like someone, how you've been able to perhaps navigate that, whether it be people kind of trolling you, so to speak, or kind of commenting back like in disagreement. Because again, the internet also provides this free flowing forum that then anyone and everyone can participate in, and that doesn't always make for a safe space. And so I'm curious if you have any comments around that and how you've had to navigate that, especially to anyone here too that's, you know, thinking of, you know, perhaps putting themselves out there the way you have.
Right. Yes, there's that whole other side of it of people trolling. People can be very mean on the internet. But yeah, I think I didn't like, you know, Instagram and Twitter at first, and I didn't want to do it, and I just thought it was fake and annoying. But then I was like, well, what do I want to do on this? You know, I don't have to pay attention to all of the things that are in my face and making me feel bad about my body, or making me feel bad about where I am in my life or in my career. Like, what do I want to do here? Let me just like block out the things that make me feel bad and put out the things that I want people to see that I think are honest representations of being a young artist and trying to make it, and the things that I struggle with just personally, and my mental health, and being a comedian and what it's like, and the different jobs that I have. And I think also, you know, there, you do have to get to a point where you're not precious, like Naz was saying about your work, because not everyone's going to like it, and not everyone's going to like you. And that's okay. And I think just after doing stand-up for a few years and, you know, bombing 100 times, I just got used to, you know, like that, those feelings. So when it's online, like there's the initial sting of a mean comment, but then it's like, you literally can't hurt me. But it's definitely something you have to grow with and keep growing with, how people use the internet and how they can be mean and bully you. But I think I try to block out all of the things that make me feel bad, and then try to use it in a way that, like, I think reaches people in a positive way, and not even like a toxic positive way, you know, like, oh, positivity always, you know, like not like that, but just in an honest way.
Absolutely. No, again, for anyone that hasn't yet followed your work, I hope that they do, and they watch, you know, the continuation of your work. I think outside of even the Cuomo, I keep calling it parody. That's not, but the sketches that you have been doing. But again, you're really spot on, and I think have some wonderful sketches that you've also promoted and pushed out through social media there too. So I agree. I wouldn't call it as like toxic positivity, but it's very, very, like I said, kind of like very spot on. You have a way of kind of really connecting at kind of like that inner core of which is what great humorists do. And this is, you know, kind of all to say, I feel like having both of you on here and just getting to talk with you both is actually very inspiring, hopefully, to a lot of people that are working during this time, that are thinking about even the idea of potentially doing something creative at this time without, you know, while also probably battling feeling unproductive or anything like that. Because, and I really do appreciate actually both of you being so honest and open about kind of where you were at emotionally with your mental health, and then also just being a woman in this industry. I think that is something we all have to, you know, kind of keep talking about, because the hurdles are so much feel bigger or further apart, or however you want to use that metaphor, where really trying to kind of battle all these kind of, you know, whether it be stereotypes or roadblocks that have been put in front of us. So it is just really nice to hear you both really kind of talk about that very specifically. And I hope that other filmmakers that are watching this are really seeing, like, you, it comes down to the art and putting it out there. that is all to say, I would like to, as we're kind of wrapping up and getting close to our hour mark, if you would each mind talking about what you're, working on now, if that feels like the right space. I don't want to push us into trying to be more productive, but perhaps, Naz, I would, if it's not this, I would like you to perhaps expand a little bit on the trilogy, and if you could also talk to us as perhaps why it kind of turned into a trilogy for you, why that feels good, and then Maria, for you, I would love to hear, with your film coming out, but other kind of work that you're doing as well.
Sure. So I will also say kind of to your previous point that, and we know this is true, but I think it's important to keep repeating it. Women are not allowed to fail. And so we often don't try, because if we fail, it's the end of our career. Whereas men are given opportunities to fall down and fail and mess up and fuck up over and over and over and over again. And that's okay. They can just, here's another chance for you. And so I think for anyone thinking about trying something creative, any woman out there thinking about try it and fail. That's okay. Maybe you won't be great the first time. Maybe you won't be great the second time. But if you love it, you have to keep doing it, and just remember that other people were given those chances, and also give those chances to other women. Allow other women to fail and allow them to try again and give them that space. I think it's really, really important. So for me, so I've made 2 films so far, Sincerely Eric and Andros in the City, and with each, I sort of pushed myself a little bit. As Maria was saying, with each video that she did, she pushed herself. And for me, it was important as a filmmaker to push myself. So the second film, I'm not sure if you've seen it, is a lot slower than the first film. There are fewer cuts. There are lots of, long takes and conversations. And sort of not what is traditionally popular, but the kinds of films that I love to watch. Obviously I'm nowhere near someone like a Cassavetes, but like if I could just have a 20-minute, dinner scene where kind of nothing happens except tension, I would.
Well, I was just going to chime in and say I have seen it, and what I actually appreciate in the 2 films together as this piece, which I'm sure you did this, or I would love to hear, is it movement and dance being a part of this felt very, I felt very connected to that in a way of you allowing kind of bodies to move within this space, like quite literally having them dance. If you might want to talk about that a little bit too. I'm curious if maybe that shows up in the 3rd film as well.
So my mom hated the fact that the second film had dance. She was like, you already did that. I was like, okay, thanks, Mom.
Right.
You're the best.
Our biggest critics are moms. Just...
I was like, it was thematic, Mom. So for the second film, I actually worked with a dancer and choreographer. He's the protagonist of the film. Andros Brown plays a version of himself, and it's about performance and sort of your career just falling apart if you're a performer in this time, if you're a live performer in this time. And so, dance is really important to me. I mean, everything from Deer Hunter to Beau Travail, like it's those dance scenes in films that just like, get me. And and I have always wanted to incorporate it into my work. And I think that you can see a lot of joy, but also a lot of sorrow in dance, and a lot of isolation, especially when it's in a way that's not expected. And I think that in Sincerely Eric, his dance reveals so much about him that is contradictory maybe to what the viewer had thought up to that point. And then in Andros in the City, the dance that he choreographed was really about touch. It was about touch in space, which relates to the topic of the film. So the 3rd film, I'm actually going this week to talk to the person that I want to be in it. And I don't know if he'll say yes, but I'm really excited.
There you go.
And
fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. And what else am I working on? I mean, my goal with the 3 films, you asked why 3 films, because I wanted to push myself with each film. And because I felt that if I had 3 films, that were good examples of my work and my ability, it would help lead into a career of directing. And that's what I want to do. I don't want to make small little films for the rest of my life. I want to get a Marvel film. I want to direct episodes of my favorite TV shows and sell my own TV shows and make big things. And because I started so late, I do feel like the clock is ticking for me, or I feel that I started late. You know, people start in their late teens and 20s making films and getting degrees in screenwriting and being in writers' rooms. And that is probably my greatest regret in life, is that I waited until I was 39 to start this.
Well, I'll just chime in and say there are many women that started very late in their careers. Like I would say most notably probably Lynn Shelton started actually making her first films at 39.
Yeah.
And
Claire Denis too.
Claire Denis, obviously. And so there are, I would say keep working. You're doing great. Like really, you're making incredible work. So but to your point, I think that actually you're commenting about this and being in this space and talking about this is about, I really appreciate you talking about women just not being given the opportunity to fail. We've all seen that with the second feature, right? Especially for female directors, right? You've got to make the perfect first feature and you have to make a perfect second feature in order to be, be able to be taken seriously in our industry. So I'm very excited for you to be making this third one. And I just really appreciate that, you have this clear, this is what I want to do and, hold on to that. And I hope again, filmmakers that that are listening, like it's okay to have those dreams and it's okay to say it out loud. It's okay to be proud of it and go and pursue that, to your point. And so for Maria, I would love to hear what's kind of what you're working on, and maybe it's like, and especially around the release of the film coming up this week, excuse me.
Yeah, I definitely want to add to what Naz said about, women not being able to fail. I think a lot of what took me so long to start doing stand-up was because I was kind of waiting for permission. And I feel like I waited for permission for a lot of things. And once I stopped waiting for permission from anyone, from men in the comedy scene, from, whoever to tell me I was allowed to do this, was when I really felt like free and I could just create, and I didn't care if anyone didn't like it, or I didn't care if it wasn't good enough in some person's eyes. And I think Naz, like saying that you started late, I think that you didn't start late at all. Like I think this first film was it was your first film and you got a Vimeo award and a staff pick. Like that's amazing. And the New York Times, everything that you have done up until that point, especially your writing, that just shows how amazing of a writer you are, that you did that work for that long that led to this moment. So it's like you started when you started writing. And it's all been, leading to this blossom. And I hope you get that Marvel film. And like, I feel the same way as I don't want to make comedy videos on the internet forever, but that's what I have to do right now to hopefully lead to the next bigger thing. But yeah, I'm going to release my film. I hope people will watch that and get something from it. And I've been working on a pilot and, pitching that to production companies and things like that. So hopefully that will get picked up and I'll get to do something with that. And yeah, so I definitely have dreams of moving into TV and film as an actor and writer. So I would love for that to be a part of where I'm going.
Wonderful. Like I said, I'll keep kind of saying how lovely it was to chat with you both. This was, really in thinking about framing, bringing new voices, that kind of the title of this panel. It's not that you're necessarily like new to the scene or new voices. I just really appreciate this type of honesty around like, you guys were creating at a very, very difficult time. And and please forgive me if I'm trying to sum this up too broadly, but it's really important to hear like you guys, you both needed to create the work that you made. And I think that we should, in all of this, it's not about necessarily like new systems. You're kind of creating your own, which I love. Like, it's just like, we can skip film festivals. The internet is where I'm going to try and build this audience. And I just really appreciate both of your perspective and real honesty that you brought to this conversation around where you're at, what you want to pursue. And it's just, that to me is what's so helpful at this time personally. So I know I probably got a lot out of it. I hope that the audiences that are chiming in did as well, that this this idea about this, of both of you being, like I said, really creative at a time that I think a lot of people really retreated, is just showed again, I think, to me, how driven you both are to, make sure that your work is being seen and getting out there, and your perspective is being seen by many other people. So I can't thank you enough for this time and conversation. You have any other words you'd like to add, and as we say goodbye to our audiences in this virtual space?
Yeah, I have a question for both of you. I would love to know where I can see your work. I know, Amanda, you are the programmer for a website that, or a media company that features short films mostly, right? And Maria, I'd love to know where I can see more of your work.
Go for it, Maria. You sounded like you were going to go first.
I mean, you can mostly just find me on Twitter. I found you already. I followed you, so don't worry. But yeah, so that's where I put most of my stuff out there. So
on Twitter, okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And I was going to say, yeah, I just, there's a new company that is kind of, joined, soft launched in this scene in this time during COVID, called Argo, which specializes in short film distribution. And I've been brought on to oversee their programming and acquisition. And so in the hopes is to try and answer that earlier point you made about short films not making money, we're trying to build a pipeline for monetization, like quite literally through revenue share or like very fair licensing fees. And the idea is to be a curated space for short film all around the world. So it's an ambitious goal to be the home of short films, and we love all of the different opportunities that short films have, but we're just really seeing that there's an opportunity. A part of Argo is that the films actually play within a playlist, so they're not just like single films they exist as their own entity on the service, but that there is kind of a journey that you take and context that's kind of given, whether by like moods or themes through the films.
I love that.
And yeah, it's very new. I joined the team actually in January, and came before them, like I said, and I continue to program. So we will, of course, be in touch about all things short film. And again, this is so lovely. Thank you both for your time and really thoughtful commentary on what you're doing in our industry.
Thank you so much for having me.
Questions.
Thank you.